Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. At the beginning of Joe Biden's administration, we published a video outlining some of the most prominent promises the new president had made on what he'd do with his first 100 days in office. At the time, we promised we'd come back in about 100 days, and well, here we are. So let's take a moment to reflect on our introduction to President Biden, what he's accomplished, which promises he's quietly ignored, and what polling tells us about the public's reaction to the beginning of his presidency. Before we start, I'm pleased to announce that because TLDR is growing, we're moving office into a new, bigger space. That means we have to move a lot of stuff though, so we're holding an office clearance sale. All of our merch is discounted, including all of our badges for only $3.99. But we're also selling office things like our sofa and our fridge. No, seriously, we're selling them. So check out the store if you want a pin or even our sofa. It's linked in the description. One of the easiest of Biden's initial promises to measure, as well as one of the most important, was his pledge that by day 100, 100 million shots of the COVID vaccine would have been administered. And in that area, the president has been emphatically successful. Now, of course, Biden did not single-handedly inject 100 million Americans with the vaccine, nor was much of the actual rollout within his power to control. But the joy of the American presidency is that such nuances are almost entirely irrelevant in the world of politics. We just want someone to laud or lambast. And since President Biden managed to not screw this one up, he generally gets the former. In fact, not only has his original goal been met, but he's exceeded it, and not by a small margin either. Currently, over 230 million jabs have been jabbed, with almost 100 million Americans fully vaccinated. Biden has also signed into law the American Rescue Plan. The bill is arguably his administration's most significant legislative accomplishment to date, and with a $1.9 trillion price tag, it's a big one. Included in it, of course, were the promised $1,400 stimulus checks that helped propel Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff into the Senate, and by extension, the Democrats in that chamber to a majority. With dozens of economic recovery and anti-poverty measures in the bill, its passage was one of the most ambitious economic moves in years, and its ramifications will continue to be felt long into the future. Long enough, many Democrats are hoping, to drag a voter or two to the polls in the midterms. Which, yes, we are apparently already having to think about. Gotta love the eternal US campaign. The final big COVID-centric piece of Biden's agenda was schools. Specifically, the president's promise to have the majority of them open for in-person classes by day 100. Now, crucially, what counts as open here? For a while, the response was a very helpful, Clarification, however, came in February, when the White House made known that they consider a school open even if just one day of in-person classes took place each week. This loose definition made life a bit easier for the administration, who'd been worried that with the pace of school reopening so slow, that they'd barely be able to meet the goal, if they made it at all. But as it is, it seems like this goal will also be met. Though with a few more caveats than I'd like if I were Joe Biden and I was trying to claim this as a major victory. The main wrinkle here is racial inequality. White kids are, put simply, way more likely to currently have in-person classes than kids of other races. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. Rural areas, which are both very white and very spread out, the latter of which makes a big difference when it comes to COVID outbreaks, have been much more willing to slide back into physical schools than urban environments. School districts with larger racial minority populations often also have less access to the resources needed to make in-person education safe and possible during a pandemic. So yeah, the whole school situation is a tad complicated. And when we leave the COVID-specific area, bluntly, Biden has done a lot less. Whether you think the pandemic crisis is a valid excuse for this or not is up to you. But it's obvious that some other issues took the back burner while the White House was dealing with the global pandemic and its accompanying complications. One of Biden's big promises was that he'd get an immigration reform bill done. This kind of happened, basically meaning that, yeah, he introduced a bill, he did that pretty much right away, but it hasn't passed, and frankly, it's not even close to being passed. It's an ambitious bill, but the odds of it making it through the House and Senate are so slim, much less in its current form. So we're going to hold off diving into that can of worms for now. What's relevant right now is the bill as a whole, while it exists, isn't getting passed before day 100. Which isn't honestly wildly surprising. Since the beginning, Biden and his team were downplaying his immigration promises for the first 100 days. It seems like it was just never a bill that had any real expectation of managing to get through Congress that quickly. He'll probably focus on it eventually, but it's just not his priority right now, apparently. Another pillar of Biden's incoming agenda was racial justice. This area has seen similar results. The Safe Justice Act, which focuses on reforming aspects of the criminal justice system, which Biden aimed to sign, remains unsigned. Other racial justice-minded bills, like the George Floyd Justice in Policing bill, remain similarly stuck in various stages of legislative process. We also, back in our initial video, mentioned that Biden promised to institute a National Police Oversight Commission. This did not get stuck in any sort of legislative or bureaucratic logjam. Everyone just decided to, nix the idea altogether. Essentially, the idea was just dropped. Obviously, we don't exactly know what prompted this from within the West Wing, but the reasoning given by Domestic Policy Council Director Susan Rice was that based on close, respectful consultation with partners in the civil rights community, the administration made the considered judgment that a police commission, at this time, would not be the most effective way to deliver our top priority in this area, which is to sign the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act into law. Interpret this literally or politically as you so desire. With that, let's zoom out for the moment. Since the administration of Franklin Roosevelt, a president's first 100 days have been seen as an indicator of their political and legislative trajectory. And what does Joe Biden tell us about him? Well, as we mentioned in the first video, Roosevelt got a whopping 76 laws enacted in his first 100 days. Biden didn't quite clear that bar. The current congressional session has seen a grand total of 11 laws enacted so far, a number which is indeed a tad less than 76. But to be fair, no one has ever beaten Roosevelt's record, so maybe we should give Biden some slack here. President Trump, in his own first 100 days, signed 29 pieces of legislation, which seems to put Biden's 11 to shame, until you take a look at the page count. Those 29 laws comprised of 133 pages of legislation. By contrast, Biden's American Rescue Plan on its own nearly doubles that, coming in at 242 pages. Still though, Biden's total comes nowhere close to President Obama's page numbers, because his 2009 rescue plan on its own was a medium-sized book of 407 pages. But how Biden's 242-page rescue plan was passed also gives us an interesting picture of the new administration, because, put simply, that picture is drastically different from the rhetoric and vibe of Biden's campaign, especially in its earlier days. Biden campaigned on calm, often boring bipartisanship. Most assumed that he would be fairly moderate in office, but no. He's passed the rescue plan with no congressional Republican support, using a procedural maneuver in the Senate. And he seems to be setting up to do the same thing again in the recently proposed American Jobs Plan, a $2 trillion infrastructure bill that would rebuild and restructure numerous aspects of the American economy. Combined with the rescue plan, the infrastructure plan paints a picture of a president who, far from being slow and moderate, is ready to move as fast as he can to pass big change, bipartisan or not. So has Biden done a good job in his first 100 days? Well, besides a couple of clear victories, that's hard to judge. However, on the whole, the American public seem to be supportive. Current aggregated polling puts President Biden's approval rating at 54%. Breaking that down by topic, nearly 70% of voters support Biden's handling of the pandemic. A majority also approve of his COVID rescue plan and his infrastructure plan. But only about 30% approve of his handling of border issues. Ultimately, it comes down to party affiliation more than anything. Surprise, surprise. 78% of Republicans strongly disapprove of Biden at this stage, compared to 95% of Democrats approving and 47% of independents. This might feel only natural. People will always back their own side, but these numbers do show incredibly high levels of polarization. In fact, that Republican disapproval number is higher than the number of Democrats who strongly disapproved of Trump 100 days in, and almost double the same number that Obama had in 2009. It's even more stark when you look at the polls related to the economy. 58% of voters rated the economy negatively in September 2020, and the number hasn't changed today. What's changed is the party breakdown, with Republican confidence tanking since Biden's takeover and Democrats soaring. So while the overall numbers stayed static, the parties have completely flipped based on who's in the Oval. It seems then that polarization is only getting worse. Maybe it's people only supporting their own tribe. Maybe it's a diverging media landscape. Who knows for sure? But what we do know is that your approval of Biden's first 100 days links pretty directly to if you voted for him 6 months ago or not. Regardless of whether you like him or not, Biden has had a bold first 100 days. Based on his time as VP, most interpreted him as the moderate to Obama's energetic progressivism. And perhaps that was true in 2008, but those 8 years as VP changed his outlook significantly. Many in the new administration are specifically citing the 2008-2009 economic crisis as defining Biden's current thinking. During that time, Obama tried to work with Republicans. He compromised and went smaller than many Democrats wanted, and he negotiated, trying to get as much GOP support as possible, only giving up when the Republicans made clear that it wasn't possible for them to be swayed by him. Biden is clearly willing to negotiate with GOP Congress members, and has done so already. But unlike Obama, Biden is shaping up to be very willing to leave the negotiating room if he decides that it's just not worth the trouble. In a strange twist, Biden's government is shaping up to be far less politically cautious than his old boss. So, what's the future of the Biden administration? Only time will tell. And his first 100 days did have their missteps and their left-behind policies. But overall, let's just say that Sleepy Joe isn't looking as sleepy anymore. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.